In my previous video, where I discussed the allegory of trauma in the first Nightmare on Elm Street film, I mentioned the fact that an allegorical reading of a nightmare film is most often tied to the second entry to the franchise, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. This film follows Jesse, whose family moves into the house where Nancy and her family lived in the first film. Jesse is having trouble sleeping. His dreams are always hot, sweaty, and disturbing, and his room, which used to be Nancy's room, is extremely warm. Furthermore, it's always really hot in the entire house. Might be because y'all are wearing sweaters and tight denim jeans instead of, I don't know, shorts and t-shirts when it's hot, but I digress. Given that some time has passed since the first film, the teenagers of Elm Street have seemingly forgotten about Freddy. The only way for him to start killing again is to find a vessel. The perfect candidate for that is Jesse. I'll be honest with you, this film is not that great. The acting is often laughably bad, with the strongest performer, well, other than Robert Englund of course, being Grady, the jock character, and that's saying something. The film also feels incomplete, or more of a TV film, with a runtime just around 70 minutes without credits, with random reused shots, lack of definition between dreams and reality, and ideas that are only explored on surface level. Freddy Krueger is also not very present in the film, and he's defeated quite easily. However, I do like Freddy's Revenge. It's campy, it's interesting to dissect. It brings certain ideas to the franchise that are not touched upon in any other entries, so it feels a little disjointed from the rest of the franchise. If you are aware of the discourse surrounding this film, and if you read the title, you know what I'll be talking about. Many reviews, academic papers, and in general comments about Freddy's Revenge point out the fact that the film has some gay undertones, while others also say that it's actually homophobic. Either way you look at it, both ratings of the film are nuanced and layered. The rating of the film does depend on the viewer, and from what I could see while reading some takes on the film is that many insert their own experiences as gay men into the film, creating narratives that were not there to begin with. Thus, it adds a subjectivity to these claims that can easily be disputed. In this video, I will go over the two ratings of the film and obviously the film itself, while trying to stay as objective and as impartial as possible. It's no wonder that the film is sometimes viewed as a film about being gay in the 1980s, given that it's full of metaphors that are sometimes too on the nose. For example, after Jesse wakes up after another nightmare, he's all hot and sweaty. He adjusts his genitals, and the next thing we see is this shot of two eggs being fried. We could also mention the scene where Coach Schnider, the only actually gay character in the film, is attacked. He's having balls thrown at his face. But maybe my favorite visual aid in this film, that made me actually laugh out loud when I realized it, was when Freddy appears at Lisa's pool party, and wieners start popping, and beers start doing this. The makers of the film did not really try to be overly clever with what they were doing, which isn't a bad thing, it's just an observation. With the said metaphors, let's focus on Jesse for a bit. First, I just want to mention the documentary film, Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. As it is mentioned on the film's Wikipedia article, the film examines the legacy of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, the second installment in the A Nightmare on Elm Street film series, and the life of the film's lead actor, Mark Patton. In particular, Freddy's Revenge has garnered a reputation for its homoerotic themes and subject material, which affected Patton, who was closeted at the time of the film's production. I won't be talking about his experiences with the film, because often in his takes he did do sort of a self-insert, relating his story to the characters. Allegedly, some parts of the film were changed to be more gay because of Patton's sexuality, but I haven't been able to find concrete confirmation of this. While his story and experiences are valid, it's still a little overly subjective of a viewing. With all that being said, Jesse's character was given some aspects that are ambiguous about his identity, namely his name. Jesse is a unisex name, and while this may not have been a factor in picking the protagonist's name, it is worth noting given the idea that was, and still is prevalent, of gay men being more feminine than straight men. Some people have also pointed out Jesse's high-pitched screaming as another feminine feature of his. The name Jesse also sounds similar to Nancy. So we also have that connection between the two protagonists. Another connection between the two is that their characters pose as final girls. Though in Jesse's case, he's a final boy, a character that fights against the, more often than not, male villain who's trying to take down his victims with a phallic weapon. To put it a little differently, the villain wants to penetrate its victims. Now, when the victim, or the hero, and the villain are of the same sex, that starts giving us some gay undertones. We have to ask ourselves, if Jesse is our final girl, what is he metaphorically fighting against? What is Freddy here? As I mentioned, Freddy tries to, and succeeds at, using Jesse's body as a vessel. But before doing so, he awakes certain urges in Jesse. Now, what are these urges? Well, they could be homosexual urges. As Adam Scales writes, quote, "Despite the fact that the film's protagonist, Jesse Walsh, is never revealed as being homosexual, much of the film's reception engineers Jesse's journey as one in which he seeks to handle a series of homosexual urges that are surfaced via parallels drawn between his own gay identity and those tenanted by self-identified gay audiences who discursively interrogate the film." End quote. If we are to understand Freddy as a symbol of gay identity, in particular in a teenager going through puberty and developing his sexuality in a not-so-gay-friendly United States of the 1980s, Freddy thus becomes the embodiment of Jesse's latent homosexuality. Also, the lines about Freddy wanting to use Jesse's body, or Jesse exclaiming that Freddy's inside of him, do a bit of unintentional winking at this idea. In comparison to Nancy in the original Nightmare film, Jesse does not do as much research as she did on Freddy, on dreams, or on possible ways to fight his problems. In fact, Jesse's parents, his mother especially, do try to help him. His mother offers taking him to a doctor, while his father would opt for more, let's say, conservative methods of dealing with problems. This conversation in particular is interesting, knowing that Jesse's problems could represent his repressed sexuality.
I have to work out on my own.
Yes, I know, but something's bothering you.
Mom.
We're just very concerned about you. Jesse!
I'm fine.
Can't...
Just leave me alone.
Can't we at least talk about it?
No.
He needs professional help. I think we have to take him to see a psychiatrist.
Oh, come on, Cheryl. You're out of your gourd. What the hell will that do?
I don't know. I just feel he needs help, and we don't know how to give it to him.
Oh, come on, Cheryl.
Are you hearing me? That boy's in trouble.
Unlike in the first film, the only person that dreams about Freddy is our protagonist. Jesse is the only person in his small community that is fighting this thing inside him. That can be interpreted as the only gay man in the village trope. Not even the two characters closest to Jesse in Lisa and Grady know about Freddy, but they both try to help Jesse. This leads us into maybe my favorite aspect of the film, the relationships between the characters. Whereas Lisa is presented as the love interest, maybe the actual final girl of this film, because it is because of her that Freddy is defeated, Jesse tends to always lean more towards Grady, somebody who he starts off seemingly not being friends with, but ends up having a great relationship and friendship with by the end of the film. As I've said, they both try to help Jesse. Lisa actually offers to stay up all night long with Jesse. She wants to help Jesse figure things out, but Jesse exclaims that there's nothing to be figured out. After this, the two of them make out, and right when things are about to get extra sexual, something comes out of Jesse, and he has to get away from Lisa. Now where does he go to? Well, to Grady's. While at first glance, Lisa might have been this film's Glenn, the protagonist's love interest who's neighbors with them, Jesse chooses Grady to be his Glenn. While at Grady's, we get this exchange between the two.
Something is trying to get inside my body.
Yeah, and she's female, and she's waiting for you in the cabana. And you want to sleep with me.
Like, come on, the characters are saying it too. Showing that Jesse chose Grady over Lisa, Jesse asks Grady to watch him sleep. Just how Nancy asked Glenn. Okay, it's not exactly the same, given that Glenn had also dreamt about Freddy, and he knew what Nancy was afraid of. Grady does not know about Freddy, yet he still wants to help Jesse. Actually, earlier in the film, there were some moments of Grady showing interest in Jesse, glancing back at him during a classroom scene, even though Jesse wasn't doing anything to get his attention, offering Jesse to come over, watch a movie, and help get his mind off things, just to name a few. Grady, just like Glenn, falls asleep for a brief moment, which leads into Freddy taking over Jesse's body. Freddy, the embodiment of gay urges, appears just as the two guys are technically sleeping together. Jesse here transforms, and Freddy, yet again, comes out of him, killing Grady in process. Other than everything I've said so far, there were other instances of visual or story-related aspects to this film that are deemed as gay. The first obvious one is the character of Coach Schnider, but I'll talk about him in the next part of the video where I go over the homophobic messaging and reading of the film. First, I want to mention the sign on Jesse's door that in big letters reads "No Chicks." Obviously the full sign reads "No Out of Town Chicks," but still, the sign caught my eye. Earlier, we see Jesse dancing to the song "Touch Me All Night Long," a disco track from 1984 that reveals its entire message in its name. The choice for this song is interesting, given the relation between gay culture and disco, as well as the message of the song and the fact that the only person that's touching Jesse at night is Freddy. And speaking of Jesse's dancing, during these scenes, there is a clear focus on Jesse's ass and him doing this? The film is filled with visuals focusing on men's bodies. In a way, using cinema's male gaze to focus on men. Other than the aforementioned shots, there's more. Just to name a few, pretty much any scene of Jesse waking up in bed wearing the tiniest briefs and being covered in sweat. The pantsing at the beginning showing the entirety of Jesse's ass, but then also the film not stopping there. We also get Coach Schnider getting stripped naked, and then we get close-ups of his ass being whipped. Why is there so much ass in this film? There's this shot of Jesse opening his drawer, and conveniently his bulge is right there on full display. And of course, who could forget, everything leading up to Grady's death is filled with shots like this. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's look at the less positive viewing of the film, which sees it as homophobic. I remember watching Freddy's Revenge as a teenager, probably being younger than Jesse's age, and back then I caught onto some gay undertones. Rewatching it recently, I realized how some of those gay undertones, or full-on tones, were more homophobic than anything. If we're going by the logic that Freddy represents Jesse's gay urges, and Freddy is the villain of the story, doesn't that mean that the villain of Freddy's Revenge is homosexuality? Kaminski points out the fact that there's this fear of the other in both horror films and heteronormative societies, where in the former, the other is the monster, while in the latter, it's gayness or queerness. In the case of this film, they're one and the same. We know from the first film, and from this one as well, from Nancy's diary, that the teenager's fear of Freddy gave him power. Thus, in this film, everybody's fear of Jesse's homosexuality is what's driving Freddy to kill more. But the thing is, it's not really Freddy doing some of the killings. It's Jesse. In the nightmare, when Jesse first interacts with Freddy, Freddy tries to lure him into the basement. That's dark, filled with fire, and it's really dangerous. Freddy basically wants to take Jesse to hell with him. As Scales writes, quote, "Jesse donning Freddy's claw offers a moment of personal subjectivity whereby his suppressed homosexuality has temporarily surfaced and acted in aberrant and uncontrollable ways." End quote. And then later, quote, "In a blog titled Queering the Closet, under the heading Queer Review on Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge 1985, author Jeremy Redlin writes the following. Not only is Freddy attempting to recruit a teenager to the gay lifestyle, but his newly established queer nature puts an entirely different spin on the fact that he was an established child murderer in the first film. He adds, Freddy Krueger has been subtextually reinvented as a gay pedophile." End quote. Other than this reading, more socially relevant to the time reading of the film, some have seen Freddy's character in the film as a symbol for AIDS. Kaminski writes, quote, "Jesse has nightmares of being gay, represented by Freddy himself, and Jesse fails to suppress him. Freddy Krueger represents the queerness within Jesse, and this queerness cannot be hidden, especially around his attractive male friend. Jesse, or Freddy, or both, proceed to murder Grady by penetration with Freddy's iconic claws. Therefore, is Jesse's queerness dangerous? This consideration can be expanded by considering Freddy not just an image of repressed sexuality, but of AIDS itself. Jesse is gay and has the illness of Freddy within him that kills Jesse's male friend. Overall, we can consider both Jesse and Freddy as images of queerness, but they inhabit completely different sides of the spectrum. Jesse is the innocent closeted gay man, while Freddy is the monstrous repressed sexuality and the spread of disease that elicits intense fear among the gay community. Since this movie was made in the homophobic 1980s, how positively can it really reflect a gay character? End quote. Anytime Jesse lets Freddy in, he becomes violent and dangerous, which makes him both the victim and the villain, the monster. He is not the hero of his own story. It's no surprise that all of the people that Jesse, with Freddy, kills in this film are men. The second was Grady, but the first is Coach Schnider. He's described as getting his rocks off making male students do push-ups. Furthermore, he often goes to, as Grady says in the film, queer S&M joints downtown, and he allegedly likes pretty boys like Jesse. Basically, the only character in this film that's shown as actually being gay, though mind you, this is never 100% set in stone, is villainized, and in a way, his death is supposed to be celebrated. By the way, I just want to mention that Freddy is technically canonically bisexual, but that revelation came after this film, so let's not take it into consideration here. Coach Schnider also represents the stereotype of an older gay man preying on younger, late teens, early 20s guys. Listen, gay characters do not have to be 100% perfectly flawless, always right, and morally just. I love seeing flawed gay characters, because gay people are flawed too, because they are people. Shocking, I know. However, the portrayal of Coach Schnider and these sorts of portrayals of gay men do more bad than good. Actually, I don't think they do anything good. Last but not least, Lisa. Oh, Lisa. It is a bit of a shame that her character is somewhat a Mary Sue. One-dimensional too. We don't know anything about her, other than the fact that she wants to help Jesse. Help him get rid of this thing that's plaguing him. And how does she do that? By showing him true love. No, seriously, Freddy basically loses all his power not when he's in the real world, like in the first film, but when Jesse and Lisa profess their love for one another. Lisa's line of, "Fight Freddy, he doesn't even exist," gets many negative connotations when remembering what most people see Freddy as in this film. She's basically exclaiming, "Jesse, fight your gay urges, they are not real." Jesse fights Freddy only because of Lisa. He chooses to rid himself of this monster in him by choosing having a loving girlfriend. As cheesy as it sounds, and as cheesy as it is, Lisa and Jesse's love for one another is what defeats Freddy. That time Jesse ran away from Lisa and chose Grady over her was shown as a poor choice that only did more damage. His only saving grace was heterosexuality. I mentioned Jesse's name before and the curiosity of its ambiguousness, but its meaning also provides further discussion. Jesse means the Lord exists. Lisa's name means oath from God, devoted to God, or my God is bountiful. Now, I don't know if the writers were aware of these meanings, but they are very telling. A couple of months ago, I found out that one of the writers of the film intended the film to be homophobic. Emma from Spooky Astronauts here on YouTube, while talking about Freddy's Revenge, mentioned this.
Later, the writer David Chaskin admitted to his true intentions with the script. Yes, there certainly was some intentional subtext, but it was intended to be homophobic rather than homoerotic. I thought about the demographics for these types of films, young heterosexual males, and tried to imagine what kinds of things would truly frighten them to the core. Scary dreams that make them even more momentarily question their own sexuality seemed like a slam dunk to me. If you really wanted to have fun, one might argue that the entire movie is a metaphor, and Jesse, in the end, is able to control his monster inside of him with the love of a good woman.
Now, I couldn't find the quote in question, but it's an interesting piece of puzzle here. Basically, Freddy's Revenge consisted of Freddy trying to lure a teenage Jesse to succumb to his growing gay urges and ignore what's right, his heterosexuality. However, it's this choice of heterosexuality that helped Jesse survive and rid himself of the evil gayness that took over his body and mind. And I bet he and Lisa lived happily ever after, as all high school sweethearts do. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts on this film, so please do comment down below. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, maybe subscribe to the channel for more content, and thank you for watching.